The rugby league world was rocked last night after the bombshell announcement that Manly legend Daly Cherry-Evans will be departing the club at the end of the 2025 season, whether or not he continues to play on in the NRL. The halfback has played over 330 games for the Sea Eagles and is one of these guys who is just so synonymous with one particular club. The nature of the announcement coming out wasn't what DCE or the club had initially intended, with the news breaking mere hours before Cherry-Evans was scheduled to appear on Channel 9's program 100% Footy. Suddenly, a show that, as far as I'm aware, nobody watches, became must-watch viewing. Before that program started though, Fox League's NRL 360 took to the air, and that was when the news broke. Of course, they spent a fair while reacting to it and concocting rumors that there must be some sort of rift between DCE and the Sea Eagles, but that was when one of the most genuinely incredible moments in NRL contract negotiation history happened. Sea Eagles CEO Tony Mestrov, with the backing of Sea Eagles owner Scott Penn, officially rang Fox Sports and tabled Daly Cherry-Evans a 2-year offer live on television. Confusion was rampant. No one really knew what was going on. For want of a better term, there was questions as to whether DCE was going to backflip on this announcement. All eyes were suddenly on 100% Footy. So the program started with Gus, James Bracey, DCE, Danny Weidler, and Cameron Smith on Zoom. It's like that episode of Modern Family where Phil drives around the house while on a video call. DCE confirmed on the show that the announcement was in fact real, it was all true, and that he just wanted to get out ahead of the story before the speculation became too wild and too rampant. Good to see that's working out for him. Amazingly, he said that both he and the club had known that this was the case since December, and that the communications between the two parties had been really crystal clear up until they offered this 2-year deal on NRL 360. When asked whether or not he'd accept the 2-year offer, he laid down one of the most brutal rejections I've seen in my life, saying respectfully, no. He said that at this point in his career, given that he's 36 years old, he wanted to have the freedom to be able to delay his decision and wait until the end of the year to make a call on whether or not he'll retire, and that the only way for him to ensure that Manly weren't left in the lurch all season long was to cut ties with them. It's a really professional and mature decision done out of love for the club. He wants to make sure that Manly have enough time to search for another halfback so that they don't plan for him being there next year and then suddenly he leaves them high and dry come the end of the season. It certainly hasn't ended up being presented that way, but I hope Manly fans are able to see that that is the reality. I thought his performance on 100% Footy was really mature, really professional, and that he handled himself and some of the tough questions that came his way really, really well. The next morning, Manly CEO Tony Mestrov came out and faced the media and presented the club's side of the story. He agreed that there is no animosity whatsoever between DCE and the Manly Sea Eagles and maintained that the club will support Daly in absolutely any decision that he makes. He was just hopeful that DCE would reconsider and wanted to reiterate that he had tabled that 2-year deal so that Daly has the option to re-sign with Manly if that's what he wants to do. Really, depending on how long they keep that offer on the table, it could well be that by the time Daly Cherry-Evans decides that potentially he does want to play on, the offer's still there, he can re-sign and continue to play on with the Manly Sea Eagles. One thing that was really interesting though about what Mestrov said is that he mentioned moving players into different positions as part of their plan for replacing DCE. There've been rumours ever since Leaguie Hopewadi signed a long-term extension with the club that the post-DCE plan was to move Luke Brooks to halfback, Tom Trbojevic to 5'8", and Leaguie Hopewadi to that fullback position. Based on what Mestrov said here, I would say that that's what's likely to happen, and it's a bit rogue, it's a bit left field, but it's probably the best way to get the best players into those spine positions, and they play a different style, that's for sure, but maybe that will get the best out of Tom. That remains to be seen. I'll get to where DCE could and couldn't potentially end up in a moment, but there's just one thing I want to touch on first. It's Tuesday night. I just finished watching NRL 360, and they spent a massive chunk of the show concocting rumors, concocting feuds, concocting rifts between Daly Cherry-Evans and the club, saying that there must be some sort of bad blood there, and that Manly haven't done him right as a club legend, all this stuff. My appeal to you as the viewer is to see through that. You are intelligent enough to pay attention to what Cherry-Evans has said and what the club has said, rather than give any weight whatsoever to what Paul Crawley concocted on his drive into Fox Studios this evening. NRL 360 have an hour to fill every evening. You couldn't get through that by just starting a show and saying, yeah, there's no feud whatsoever between DCE and the Seagulls. Show over. Now they have to fill up that time. My appeal to you, please, see through it. Anyway, now in terms of where Daly Cherry-Evans could end up, he has maintained that he's not interested in entering any negotiations with any clubs anytime soon, and has nowhere near come close to making a decision on where he wants to go. There are a number of potential destinations though, and the one that I've seen spoken about the most is the Sydney Roosters. They pursued an experienced halfback in this off-season just gone, but missed out on obviously Ben Hunt. So there is a reason why they might go after a Daly Cherry-Evans style player. They have a heap of cash after all of the players that they lost coming into this season, and made a very similar signing back in 2018, bringing Cooper Cronk over from the Melbourne Storm as a veteran halfback, which of course famously resulted in them winning back-to-back premierships. The other factor as well is that DCE's player agent also represents Sydney Roosters captain James Tedesco and incoming Roosters signing Reece Robson. In terms of contract negotiations with players, relationship between agent and club genuinely does make quite a big difference. That's what these journalists are latching onto when establishing that link, and I've got to say, this does kind of feel like a Sydney Roosters signing. To me though, that club has had Sandon Smith waiting in the wings now for like 2 or 3 years, waiting on Luke Keary to retire to finally vacate a jersey. Now he has, Sandon is playing first grade, and it would seem really harsh to make him go back and play reserve grade for another couple of years because DCE has taken his spot. DCE is a miles better player than Sandon Smith is, don't get me wrong, but the Roosters do love Sandon Smith, and I reckon that they'd end up losing him if they went in the direction of Cherry-Evans. And with Smith being one of the more exciting young halves in the league, I think that's a decision they could potentially regret. Then again, I do always say, if you're not winning a premiership, what are you doing? And this is getting well back in a premiership window, so I think there's a number of reasons why that link does make a lot of sense. The other Sydney club I think they could reasonably be interest from is the St George Illawarra Dragons. They didn't plan on losing Ben Hunt, so logically they do have a pretty big amount of salary cap space allocated to that number 7 jersey. They probably have enough to get Cherry-Evans there. Would he be an upgrade on Kyle Flanagan? Absolutely. Realistically, I think Flanagan would probably move to 6 and Lachlan Ilias would be the man to make way. It'd be an all-in move on experience though, with Clint Gutherson, Damien Cook, Valentine Holmes, and now David Clemmer all moving to the club this year. Can Dad's Army get together for a premiership push? I guess we'll see. I could see it, but then again, I don't really see what the Dragons offer DCE that Manly don't, so I'm not sure that that's a likely destination for him. There is pretty strong talk that he might want to move back to Queensland, and the Gold Coast Titans have been linked. But to be honest, I think that's a bit of a lazy connection based purely on the fact that Des Hasler is at the club, as is Kieran Foran. They want to get the old boys back together, the media, but I don't expect that the Titans will agree. I mean, guys, not only are the Gold Coast Titans probably still dirty on Cherry-Evans for that backflip all those years ago, but the last thing on earth that team needs is more halves. That one just doesn't add up. I get the sense that he won't retire because players tend to know when they've lost that hunger to compete, and that player that appeared on 100% footy certainly didn't seem like a player who's got no fire left in the belly. That leaves me with one option, and it's the Dolphins. It's a move that I think makes complete sense. DCE was born in Redcliffe. His dad played for the Redcliffe Dolphins. DC himself played his junior footy at the Redcliffe Dolphins. Their future is obviously 21-year-old Isaiah Katoa, but move Katoa to 6 for just a couple of years to let him play under DCE, and it would make him an infinitely better player. Imagine everything he'd be able to pick up from playing alongside Daly Cherry-Evans for a couple of seasons. Not to mention, it would get some much needed quality and experience into the spine up there while giving DCE this fabled homecoming. I think this just makes sense on a number of fronts. The Dolphins have confirmed that they do have interest in him, but will respect his decision to not want to negotiate with clubs for the time being. If DCE does leave the Sea Eagles, it's a flip of a coin between the Sydney Roosters and the Dolphins, in my opinion. But what isn't being reported is that I do think there's quite a reasonable chance the Sea Eagles will leave that 2-year offer on the table for him by the time he makes that decision. It's not like there's halfbacks lining up to be signed on big money and go to Manly, and especially if their plan is just to shuffle the cards around and have existing players fill those roles, they're under no pressure to go out and sign anyone. I think it's going to be the most interesting transfer saga that plays out this year, and it's definitely one to watch. Anyway, where do you guys think Daly Cherry-Evans will end up playing in 2026? Or will he end up playing at all? Let me know in the comments below. If you did enjoy the video, feel free to subscribe. And if you didn't, leave a comment and let me know what I can do better. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.